Welcome to Guided Reading for Elementary Teachers. I'm Robin Dixon, pre-K through 5th grade ELA consulting teacher, and I will be your guide through this session. There will be places in the presentation for you to pause, jot, and reflect. You may work on that individually, or you may be viewing this presentation with another new staff member. I know that there will be times that you will have questions during this presentation. Please write those down and keep them in a safe place, as you will be attending a live Zoom session where all of your questions will be answered, and there will also be time for you to ask any additional questions and feel successful and ready to go forward teaching guided reading in your classrooms. Let's begin by looking at our learning intentions, which are to know the essential elements of a guided reading lesson, to determine how to test and group students for guided reading, and know how to plan a guided reading lesson. You will know you are successful when you can describe tests used for grouping students, describe ways to group students for guided reading, and know how to plan for a guided reading lesson. Let's take a moment to look at these two pictures. How do these relate to guided reading? Take a moment to pause the video and think about how these relate to guided reading. When you are finished, you may reflect on your answers, or you may share with a colleague. So pause the video, and when you are ready, you may start the video again. All right, what kinds of things did you write down or ponder on? Do you feel like you're juggling too many guided reading groups, or too many skills, or that there's just too much to keep in mind when teaching guided reading? I hope through this presentation that by the end, you're going to feel more confident in teaching guided reading, and also like you can juggle all those balls, or that you have less balls to juggle in the air. So let's take a moment to write down, what do you already know about guided reading? If you're watching alone, take a moment after you finish that and review your list. Think about what you already know. And if you're watching with another new staff member, share with your colleagues. So you may pause the video and reflect on what you already know about guided reading. I hope that you were able to share with each other, and that you have items that you already know about guided reading, and that during the remainder of this presentation, that learning is affirmed and that you add to your learning as well. So why is guided reading important? Number one, it provides equity for all. We are ensuring that all students are getting sound instruction. It also eliminates tracking, high, medium, and low. Because with guided reading, we are always looking at being flexible with our grouping by skill and F&P level. It also provides a way for students to read more challenging text with support. We're always teaching on the highest end of their instructional levels. So we're always making sure that we have that just right text for a student. It also allows for responsive teaching. So we are individualizing for the student and for the group. And it also teaches students to assume higher cognitive load. As we said, students have support, but within that support, we are teaching students to do the heavy lifting. We want our students to know how to do the heavy lifting of text so that we are able to reduce the scaffolds that we provide them. When we think of guided reading, we want to go back to Vygotsky's work on zoned approximal development. We always want to make sure that we are teaching within that center circle that says what I can learn with help, which is their ZPD in scaffolding. I like to think of it as Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We're finding what's just right, and that's what we want for our students. We want that just right level where students are learning through text that is on their level, that's not too easy and not too hard. So what is guided reading? Guided reading is a way to teach targeted instruction to individuals as well as groups of students. It is also a component of high quality reading instruction. And as I said earlier, flexible groups that are student-based. Once we test a student on their F&P level, we want to make sure that we are also being flexible and that a student may need to move temporarily to another group due to a skill deficit, or seeing if a student is ready to assume a higher text level. So, guided reading at a glance. Again, small group instruction, and what you have is a teacher with a small group of students. No more than 6 is recommended so that you can really target your instruction and that you can target feedback to students in a smaller group. The teacher is providing explicit instruction and is supporting the students to read more challenging text. The students are reading individually. The teacher is going through with each student and individualizing instruction, listening to students read aloud, etc. And again, it is responsive to individual strengths and needs. And it also says that I want to take a moment to talk about reading whole text. When we're working guided reading, we want to read smaller pieces of text so that we are increasing the breadth and depth of what we're reading. There's a bit.ly that I would like you to open your browser and go to. And I want you to watch this video and I want you to read the blog. And then I want you to take a moment to reflect on your new learning from that blog and from that video. And I'd like you to make notes on your new learning. If you're watching with another colleague, I want you to take time to share with that colleague as well. So you may pause the video, watch the video on the bit.ly link, read the blog, and then continue on when you are ready to the next slide. So let's take a moment to talk about what guided reading is not. Guided reading is not popcorn or round robin reading. It's not student A reading page 1 rather. It's not student 2 reading page 2, and so on. All students are engaged in reading the text at the same time, individually. It is also not teacher focused. It is not based on, I want to teach this book because. It's based on what are the students' needs and how am I going to meet those. It is not completing a series of worksheets. In fact, when we're teaching guided reading, we are engaged in reading the text, we are engaged in discussion and meaningful follow-up activities. And it's not using a text that is too hard or too easy. Again, that text that's on the highest instructional level. Let's take a moment to look at the difference between primary and intermediate guided reading. Let's look at what is the same regardless of grade level. First of all, you're going to use a level text in a small group setting. You're also going to teach on all levels of the F&P continuum, which we will get to shortly, and you'll understand what the F&P continuum is. Also, you're using a variety of text, fiction, nonfiction, persuasive. You want to expose students to a wide variety of reading material. It is also well-planned. Well-planned instruction means that we're not just picking up a book and teaching it on the fly. We have mapped out the skills that we want to teach, the essential vocabulary words, etc. And we will get to more on planning at the end of this presentation. So intermediate versus guided reading, what is different? So one of the things that may be different is how phonics looks. If I'm a 5th grade teacher teaching a level Z, my phonics component may look very different. I may not have a true phonics component, whereas in primary reading, I have a high deal of phonics instruction occurring. It's also, you may be meeting readers' needs in different ways, meaning you might be working with higher students in more of a small group setting. Primary, you may be working more in a one-on-one basis if need be. Also, intermediate guided reading, you have the ability to work through higher levels of DOK, which stands for depth of knowledge. So in a 5th grade classroom for guided reading or 4th grade classroom, you're going to have longer, more complex texts in terms of genre, in terms of theme, detail. So you're going to have the ability to work through a level 3 question much easier than a primary teacher who is teaching a level B or C, for example, that doesn't have the level of difficulty in text. In the upper grades, your word study will definitely be included. It will be things like affixes, root words, bases. If I know the word sugarless, then do I know helpless, for example. So you at the upper and the intermediate grades will have a higher focus on word study and vocabulary skills. Also in the intermediate grades versus the primary grades, you may have a higher ratio of nonfiction material. And this may be due to the fact that you may embed the subject content in guided reading to science and social studies. And in the intermediate grades, you're going to have less familiar and less predictable text. If you're primary and you're teaching a level A through D, you're going to have very predictable text on a page where just 1 or 2 words changes. In intermediate, that is definitely not something that you have as decodable text in the same way. So let's take a moment to pause, jot, and reflect. Think about what is new information for you, what information did you already know, and what do you want to know more about? So you may pause the recording, write down your answers, and when you are ready, proceed to the next slide. All right, let's take a moment to determine F&P level, which when we look at F&P level, there are 2 primary ways. The first one is the F&P benchmark assessment, which is given 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And between those testing windows, you will complete running records that will help you determine when a student is ready to move up to the next F&P level. Now, when you are testing, this is just for your information right now to look at. As you get into testing in the fall, please reach out to your coach. Your coach will be more than happy to walk you through this, to model for you, and to help you as you are testing. So when I talk about instructional level, I am talking right here where it talks instructional. And notice that for levels A through K, I have a set of criteria. And then for levels N through Z, a set of criteria. And what we want to find is this instructional level right here, for example, right up here. If I look at benchmark criteria levels N through Z, and I look at 95 to 97% accuracy, notice that a score of 7 to 10 on comprehension gives us an instructional level. And your coach will be able to give you more information on that, but I wanted you to see how you determine that. So in levels A through K, the highest level that we want to find for instructional level is a 90 to 94 accuracy with excellent or satisfactory comprehension, or you may have accuracy at 95 to 100 with limited comprehension. So notice that there are 2 different criteria. So you want to make sure that you're keeping those in mind. For my, primarily my intermediate friends, notice that the highest level with 95 to 97% accuracy is with excellent or satisfactory comprehension, and 98 to 100 accuracy and limited comprehension. And again, when we look at the gradients, we have level A through Z. So notice that level A through D is approximately kindergarten, F through J is first grade, and so on. So let's move on to how you create guided reading groups. You've tested your students on the benchmark assessments. Now, what do? You have students that may be anywhere from a level a level L through a Z, or a level A through a G? How do you group those students? So we're going to start by looking at F and P level. You want to avoid large grade level bands. So you don't want to do an A through a D group, for example. You don't want to do an LPQ group, for example. Add R into that. Because you want to have them as targeted as possible. And again, no more than 6 at the same level. So you can make 2 groups. So let's say you are a teacher that has 8 students at the same reading level, a level P, for example. You can create 2 level P groups, because we know that not all students in the level are equal. So maybe your Ps, you have some that are about ready to move to the next level. You can make a group of Ps that are ready to move on. And maybe you have some students that are just are brand new to P, a little shaky. Those could be a group as well. So let's look at scheduling group. This is a 4th grade example. And I base this on a 60-minute guided reading group, guided reading block with 4 groups. So this just kind of shows you how I would group students. So, and these are important non-negotiables on the left-hand side. Beginning and developing readers should be met with every day. So if we look at this, we can see that N through O in 4th grade would be met with every day, because they are behind and we need to get them up to grade level. Proficient readers you could meet with every day or every other day. In this example, Qs are grade level or proficient, so we would still meet with them every day. Advanced readers you could meet with 2 or 3 days a week. Now, this may work for you, this may not. You may have students that are more spread out, not spread out. So again, this is just a flexible idea to get you thinking. Now, we talked about grade level bands. Notice that my advanced readers, I have 3 grade level bands. I have R, S, T for levels. You can stay within 3 levels of an F and P. That would be great. And that would be the largest that we would go. So I want you to take a moment to reflect on testing and grouping students for guided reading. What did you learn about testing students? And what are some ways to group students? And again, remember, if questions arise, please jot them down for your live Zoom session, as you will have time to ask questions during that time. So you may pause the video, and when you are ready, you may proceed to the next slide. So how do you select text for guided reading? First of all, we want to remember that we want to look at text on all different types of genres, fiction and nonfiction, for example. Also, think about how can you connect to something that you're already teaching. If you're teaching content in science or social studies and you want to take a deeper dive into that content, how can you connect that to science and social studies, for example? It is a great way to look at cross-curricular teaching. Is it appropriate text for the group? Is it something that they will understand? Is it something that they have the background knowledge for? Something that you're able to build the background knowledge for? And some great places to check for text selection reading: your guided reading book room, Reading A to Z, Newsela, Common Lit are places where you can find text for your guided reading groups. When we look at text selection, when you're looking at nonfiction, it is a great way to add in things that students might be interested in, or Newsela always has super interesting science articles about topics that students are really interested in. So anything that you can do to engage interest is essential in text selection. Also, look for examples of high quality writing in specific genres. Consider the text features. Can you do teaching with those text features, or has a piece of text done an excellent job embedding graphics or maps? Can you use those to teach? We know that in grades 3 through 5 on state assessment, Text features, graphics, etc. are essential part of the state assessment. So where can we embed that? Quality illustrations also fall under that. What text is culturally sensitive and reflects the diversity in our world? And in fiction stories, what stories can have deeper messages and themes? So what do you do during a guided reading lesson? What happens during the time that you have a student at your table or a group of students at your table? First of all, you're going to introduce the text. This is the critical component, to observe the children as they read the text individually. You're going to be listening to students, and you are going to be recording notes on their errors or things that they're doing well as readers. You're also going to have discussion on the text, and then you're going to engage in an activity, and then you're going to extend their understanding through writing. And again, that one is optional, but if you can extend what they're reading, that is an excellent skill to do. 3 parts of a guided reading. As we looked at an overview, let's dig deeper. Before reading, during reading, and after reading. 3 essential components. So before you read a selection, you want to explain the purpose. You want to activate their prior knowledge. If you're reading a story about baseball, what do they know about baseball? Or maybe they play baseball, or they play softball, or they've been to a game before. We want to get students thinking about that topic. And if there's any place where you need to front load, this is the time to do it. So for example, if you're reading a story about baseball and there's something in that story that students need to know, then you need to front load that for them so that they have that knowledge in their schema as they're reading the story. Again, assess the prior knowledge, connect the story to students' lives. With primary, you may do a book walk. You might do that with intermediate as well. Making predictions about what the story is going to be about what they're going to read is also important. So during a guided reading lesson, what happens? This is the meat of a guided reading lesson. So as you are teaching, you might say to the students, all right, I want you to read to the bottom of page 3, and I want you to be able to tell me why Sally was upset. And so as students are reading to find that answer, you are listening to students read individually. You are giving them tips and feedback about their reading, about their comprehension, etc. So let's look at the connection to culturally relevant teachers. Or relevant teaching, excuse me. So we want to make all students independent learners and readers. So again, by having students all read the text individually, we are also scaffolding and providing them the instruction and tools that they need to be independent readers. So feedback. By engaging in frequent feedback cycles that lead to change, teachers deepen and strengthen their partnership with students. We want students to see that our feedback to them is helping them to grow as readers. We also want to build their confidence, and we want them to see that they can succeed at this. Guided reading is an excellent place to cultivate an academic mindset and growth during that reading portion. We are providing scaffolds so that students know that they can individually tackle and read this text. So during guided reading, what skills can we teach? We can look at, number 1, your CDMs, your curriculum design maps. That is going to give you a great place to find out the skills that you are working on during shared reading so that you can also teach those skills during guided reading. You can also look at the state standards, which will guide you in what students need to know at your particular grade level. And these are some just general skills that you can work on. Plot, character, compare, contrast, context clues, vocabulary. You might also consider thinking of making an anchor chart during shared reading, and then you can also use that anchor chart during guided reading as well. You can also teach reading strategies during this time. So it is a great time to teach students strategies that strong readers do. Self-monitoring, for example, summarizing, inferring, making connections, asking questions. These are all things that good readers do that we want to teach our students to do as well. We want students to question what they're reading. Many times students don't ask questions. They just read and go on without really pondering and using strategies. So teach those strategies to students. We talked a little bit about anchor charts. So this book is a great resource. You may have fellow teachers that have that book that you can borrow. Your coach may also have a copy, and there's also one, this one says teaching 3 through 8. There's also a sense chart for K through 2. And anchor charts are a great representation and visual for students to use during guided reading. If you have created those during shared reading, you can then use that anchor chart during guided reading. So after the guided reading lesson, what do? So after you finish reading a story, we want students to synthesize that information. We want them to extend their learning. We want them to apply it in a new way. So here's some ways to do that. You can do that through writing. You can do that through a Kagan cooperative learning structure, journals. So these are ways that we can get students to take what they've studied and learned and apply it in new ways. So I have just gone through a lot of information on what to do during a guided reading lesson. So I want you to take a moment to pause the video. What's a new piece of learning? You may have several. What was an aha? And what are skills that you will teach for your particular grade level? Again, you may do this individually, or you may do this with another new staff member. So take a moment to pause and answer these 3 questions. These are big questions, so it may take you a moment or 2 to do that. So you may pause, and when you are ready, proceed to the next slide. All right, I hope that you were able to add to your thinking, add to your learning, that you are getting your wheels turning for skills and what guided reading will look like in your classroom. So let's move on. I mentioned this book earlier, The Continuum of Literacy Learning, and your coaches all have this textbook in their libraries. It's not a textbook, it's a guide, sorry about that. But this will show you genres, text structures, theme, fluency, thinking within the text. And what it's going to do is it's going to show you, what does a reader look like at a level A through Z? It will give you detailed information on what a solid level A reader looks like, a solid level B reader, and so on. So that can also help you to determine skills that you would like to teach within your guided reading groups. And when you are ready to move levels, sometimes when you're working with a small group in guided reading, you will have a student that you just know is ready to move on. They are rocking it in your guided reading group. So how do we know that that student is truly ready to move on to the next level? First of all, are running records indicating that a student is moving on? If you are doing running records weekly, which may be easier in the primary, and your coaches can also tell you what is written in your school improvement plan, so that you will know how often you need to be conducting running records. If they are seeing after 2 or 3 running records that they are ready to move on, move that student in a group and see if he or she is ready to tackle more challenging text. Is that student mastering the areas in the literacy and learning continuum? Do the official benchmark assessments show movement is needed? For example, in August, if you test a student at a level J, and then when you test again in winter, are they ready for level M or N? You need to move that student. And can the student work effectively with fiction and nonfiction? That's essential because as students get older, we know that they're going to encounter multiple types of text. So we want students to be able to efficiently work with fiction and nonfiction. We can also look at moving levels and using flexible grouping. I have included a picture for you, and you will see at the top where there are pictures with areas. And you'll notice that this teacher has moved students in groups based on their need and when they are ready. So we must think of flexible reading groups when we think about guided reading. Just because a student tests at a P in August does not mean that we keep that student at a P until the next testing period. If that student is ready to move on, we need to do that. And you can see here that we have students that have moved up groups, and we have a student that moved from R back to Q momentarily. And keep in mind that this could also be based on skills. If students are showing that they need the skills in a lower level, we'll move that student back and forth accordingly. So always know that flexible groups are essential in guided reading. And planning is essential and key. Guided reading cannot be taught on the fly. It must be purposely planned like any other subject area. The stronger the planning, the stronger the instruction, and the stronger the results for our students in the long run. So I have included 3 lesson plan templates for you. And on those templates, you will see things ranging from vocabulary to comprehension questions throughout the template. And I planned every single guided reading lesson that I did for students. So planning is key. And when thinking of vocabulary, think not just about the definitions of words, but think about, does that word have a common affix that might be used to decode other words as well? So take a moment to pause the video and look through these templates. Does one of them resonate with you? Do you see where you could take a template and modify it to fit your needs? And I also know that the templates that primary may use may be very different than what intermediate uses. This is also a place where your coach and your colleagues will come in to benefit you. Find out what they're doing and what they recommend as well. So pause, look at the templates, and start the recording again when you are ready to move on. I've also included for you 4 resources. The first one, Jan Richardson, who is a leader in the field of guided reading. She will have materials that are primary and intermediate as well. So her page is full of useful templates, lesson plans, etc. FontesandPinnell.com. We do use the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark system, so that is a great place to find resources for F&P benchmark. Scholastic is also another great resource for guided reading. And I've also included for our intermediate friends, the Kansas Assessment Performance website. If you go to this website and go to your grade level, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, it's going to walk you through the skills that you need for the state assessment. It is also going to tell you where that standard is tested, at what DOK level, etc. So 3rd through 5th grade friends, please check out the Kansas Assessment Performance website. So as we conclude this presentation, what is a takeaway that you have this year? Is it in planning? Is it in teaching? In text selection? What is a takeaway? So pause, write down your takeaway, and you can have more than one takeaway, and then start the recording again. Let's look at our success criteria. Did we meet our success criteria? Can you describe tests used for grouping students? Can you describe ways to group students for guided reading? Can you plan for a guided reading lesson? I want to take a moment to thank you for watching this presentation. And again, please remember that you will have a live Zoom session follow-up where we will answer your questions and concerns with guided reading in your classroom. This was designed to be a general overview. And again, you can reach out to your coach. Your coaches are invaluable resources to you. And I am also available to you to come out and help you, teach guided reading, model a lesson for you, etc. I have included my email address in case you have any further questions or concerns. And I look forward to seeing you at our live Zoom session follow-up.